G'day everyone, I'm Jess and I'd like to invite you to read the Bible with me. Today I'm going to be reading from Colossians chapter 1, verses 9 to 14. And I really want you to know that anyone can read or listen to the Bible for themselves and understand it. And that's what we're going to do today. I'm going to read our passage and then ask 3 simple questions. What did I notice? What questions do I have? And what should I do about it? So Colossians is a letter from Jesus' follower Paul to a group of Christians. And Paul has just said to them that he's so thankful that they believe the message about Jesus. Well, let's see what Paul says next, starting from verse 9. For this reason, since the day we heard about you, we have not stopped praying for you. We continually ask God to fill you with the knowledge of his will through all the wisdom and understanding that the Spirit gives, so that you may live a life worthy of the Lord and please him in every way, bearing fruit in every good work, growing in the knowledge of God, being strengthened with all power according to his glorious might, so that you may have great endurance and patience, and giving joyful thanks to the Father, who has qualified you to share in the inheritance of his holy people in the kingdom of light. For he has rescued us from the dominion of darkness and brought us into the kingdom of the Son he loves, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sins. So the first thing I want to ask is, what did I notice? Well, it really helps me when I'm reading the Bible to see the flow of ideas. How does each bit flow on and relate to the next? And the ideas here are really interconnected. So first in verse 9, we start with Paul praying for the Colossians. He's praying because there's something he really wants for them, but he knows he can't do it on his own. So he has to ask the one who can, God. So he's praying, and that flows on to, what does he pray for? Well, he's asking God to fill them with the knowledge of his will. And that flows on to, what's that knowledge of his will for? Well, it's not so they'll know the secrets of the universe. It's not so they'll know what job to have or who to marry. And the knowledge of God's will is so they can live a life pleasing to God. Notice how there are 4 elements to this life pleasing to God: bearing fruit in every good work, growing in the knowledge of God, being strengthened with all power, and giving joyful thanks to the Father, God. So these are the 4 elements of a life that pleases God. I want to focus on just one that has really stood out to me this time, the third one, being strengthened with all power. So when you read it, you see all these powerful words, being strengthened with all power according to his glorious might. For what? For mighty works, for amazing achievements? It's for endurance and patience. Isn't it interesting that Paul says that this strength is for the purpose of having great endurance and patience? I'm really noticing that in this passage, the knowledge and power of God are so significant for our everyday lives. What might seem mundane, but it actually is a miracle that God helps us in our everyday lives to please him and to keep going even when it's hard. So that's what I noticed. Next, I asked myself, what questions do I have? And as I was reading this, one question really kept sticking out to me. It was, how do I know if I've done enough of these 4 things to please God? It really bothered me because I couldn't see any answer coming from this passage. But after reading it a few times, I think verse 12 is really helpful, where it says, the Father who has qualified you to share in the inheritance of his holy people in the kingdom of light. So we don't need to worry about qualifying ourselves to be accepted by God, to be brought into his kingdom. He's already done it. And we see more about how God did it in verses 13 and 14, 2 verses that I love. He rescued us from the dominion of darkness, from life without God. And he brought us into the kingdom of the Son he loves. That's Jesus. And verse 14 tells us how. We can be brought into this kingdom, we can be accepted by God, because through Jesus, we have redemption and forgiveness of sins. That's why Jesus died on the cross. And so we can live this beautiful life described in verses 10 and 12, not worrying if we've done enough, but knowing we have been qualified by God. And so we can live in thanks for what he's done for us. Well, the last question I want to ask when I'm reading the Bible is, what should I do in response to what I've read? If you're watching this and you aren't a Christian, I'm so glad you're checking out the Bible. And I think this passage has a clear message for you, that you can be brought into God's kingdom through Jesus. He can give you forgiveness, a fresh start, and you can be accepted by God and live this life of joy and thankfulness. And for those of us who are Christians, isn't that something to be so thankful for, that he's accepted us into his kingdom? And so let's try to put into practice these 4 elements of a life that pleases God. And there are so many ways we can think about how to do that. For me personally today, I really want to think about the 3rd one, being strengthened with his power for endurance and patience. I want to remember that in tough times, we don't need to either run away or put the whole burden on our own shoulders, but we can rely on God to give us strength. So that's Colossians 1, 9 to 14. We've seen that because God has brought us out of darkness into the kingdom of his Son, we have so much to thank him for. And this thanks flows out into a life that pleases God. Thanks for joining me today, and I hope that you'll give reading the Bible a go for yourself.